fire up the braai. Let's get the party started. Welcome to On the Whistle. I'm your host, Zayn Nabbi. Drum roll, please. With me, we have Spirit Cup winner, former CAF Champions League player, and former Premier Soccer League winner, Courtney Freese, with me. Next to him, we have Alasdair Howorth, our multi-platform, cross-platform, wonderfully knowledgeable, East African expert, high-flying, luscious locks, man at the AFCON later this summer. How are you doing? How are you both doing? Do you like your intros?
I'm feeling good after that.
Honestly, Zayn, you know that intro, what I was thinking of? I was feeling like Steph Curry. Looking for a hoop and just honestly.
You know what? If we were ballers and we're not, I reckon Alasdair would be the one who'd dominate. Just height, pure height.
Yeah, no skill, no talent, just height. That's what I bank on.
You know what I mean? He'd be dunking on his Freeze. But listen, lads, always good to see your ugly mugs. Today's show, for those listening out there and those watching on YouTube, we're going to go through our highlights of the season, also some transfer talk, who will end up where, the biggest African outside of Europe, and obviously looking at South Africa, where there could be a big move on the cards for Ronwen Williams, who appeared on this podcast not so long ago. And then we head to the mailbag. We'll be reading some of your comments. You know, we love to hear from you. And on YouTube, our video with Bruce Grobler, when he was talking about ending the Liverpool curse, has suddenly got a huge new life on YouTube. We've got some fresh comments in that I will be filtering and reading out. But first of all, guys, let's get this braai started. Let's get the talkers going. The season has pretty much come to an end in Europe and in Africa. Of course, some of the North African leagues still rolling on. We wait to see what will happen with Pitso Masimane and Al Ahly, for example, in the Egyptian Premier League. But for all intents and purposes, most of the big leagues and smaller leagues have come to an end. Alasdair, let's start with you. When you look back around the braai at the season, the dust is now settled. What were some of your highlights and memorable moments?
I mean, I have to think back to just the last couple of weeks in terms of the CAF Champions League and CAF Confederations Cup. Kind of I think they've both been really, really excellent seasons. We've seen some fun rides from teams that, you know, might not have been expected to get there, kind of like Orlando Pirates and the Confederations Cup. You know, no disrespect to Orlando Pirates, but they haven't had the most stellar season, you know, on South African soil, but for them to make it all the way to the final and really, you know, push Burkane and be the better side in the final was amazing. And, you know, similar with Petro Luanda in the semi-final, putting out Sundowns and, you know, dominating Zamalek, putting them out in the group stage has been a fun ride. But I think, you know, the one thing for me that has kind of stuck out is, and, you know, feels like an increasing trend, is the emergence and dominance of Moroccan clubs. You know, you're seeing two winners this time in Burkane and Wydad. You know, last year we saw Raja winning Confederations Cup. I think since 2017, there's been a Moroccan in the final of the Confederations Cup every single year, and only twice have they not won it. And you're seeing Wydad get continually making it to the final and semi-finals of the Champions League. So I think it's just an interesting trend that we're starting to see. You know, Morocco have invested a lot in their infrastructure, in their football in the last few years, and we're starting to see it pay off. So I think in terms of the club football, for me, that's been a real highlight. I mean, not a highlight if you're not Moroccan, obviously. And obviously, you know, seeing the end of the three-peat attempt by Pitso Masimane and his Al Ahly team, who came so close to really kind of making history, but, you know, they have to rebuild and reset now.
Alasdair, that was fantastic hearing your takeaways. Courtney, it's been such a great season. What captured your attention?
For me, my attention was captured by the situation at the African Nations Cup with the small island of Comoros, and just how they navigated themselves through the tournament, and then got to the quarterfinals against Cameroon, where they had to play an outfield player in goal. And still put up and here's the word, a spirited performance, which was unlike anything I'd seen. A really fighting performance with players sent off, really pushed Cameroon. And this is a team with no real background or pedigree or history of good football. first time at an African Nations Cup tournament, really putting in a huge display, coming out of that game with more credit than the hosts themselves. So that was one of my biggest highlights. And then just the fact that the African Nations Cup, during such a turbulent period, went ahead. You know, there's a lot that Africa doesn't get credit for. There's a lot that Africa gets hammered about. And there's a lot that Africa gets said we are behind Europe for. But our other brother Francis is not online at the moment. He'd be able to tell you the crowds, the supporters, the people were at these stadiums enjoying football. And that was a highlight for me, just having supporters back in the game. Because without the supporters, that extra 10% that players need was always missing. So those were my two huge highlights of the season.
We've spoken about some of the teams. We've spoken about Morocco. We've spoken about fans being back. But there were certainly a number of coaches, Alasdair, who performed excellently.
Yeah, I think, looking at the AFCON, there was coming into it. I remember we were talking with Babacar Diarra, who came onto the pod, and he's talking about how, Aliou Cisse was under so much pressure coming into this final, and it was essentially kind of win or go home. He was going to get sacked if Senegal didn't win it, and they got over the finish line, they won it, they beat Egypt, they scrapped through it, winning on penalties. They weren't blowing teams away, they weren't as exciting as some of the other teams like Cameroon in the tournament, but they did it, and then they did it again, in the World Cup qualifiers against Egypt again on penalties. Sensational result. But yeah, I think it's really important to point out, in African football, we've always had the talent, we've always had the superstar players. If you look back through all the years, but it feels like we're starting to catch up in terms of the coaching quality. CAF have just, have finally launched their own licensing structure, and we no longer have to rely on UEFA. And we're seeing that now with the very first batch finishing off their CAF licenses now, the likes of Pizzo, the likes of Walid Regragui and Aliou Cisse. And, these are the guys who are now starting to clean up on the continent. Pizzo is obviously quickly becoming the most successful person in CAF history in terms of club competition. Walid just won the CAF Champions League. And, we're starting to see a lot of African coaches emerging, like Florent Bengue, who won the Confederations Cup. And I think it's brilliant, because I think for far too long in Africa, we've settled for kind of second-tier European coaches who are coming across the continent with nothing on their CV except for a coaching badge and license, and being given a really good job. And struggling and not doing well. And it's great to see African coaches really thriving, and seeing them kind of really pushing the envelope. And we're seeing in South Africa with a lot of these other guys coming through, like Coach Rulani and Benny. These are top coaches. It feels like it's only a matter of time when we'll start being the ones importing coaches back to Europe. Hopefully we'll be seeing that, because the quality of coaches is finally starting to catch up to the quality of players that we're producing. And I think that's been a real highlight for me this season.
We also can't forget about the women's game. Somebody that stood out to me as a Barcelona fan was Asisat Oshola, how she was so instrumental in Barcelona's 3 titles that they won. Their 2 titles that they won, the league and the cup, of course, playing in the Champions League final. She was crucial. She's a Nigerian superstar. We look forward to her and how she will perform in the women's AFCON later this year. But again, the women's game continues to develop. Yes, there are challenges. Yes, there's areas where there needs to be more of an imbalance and more equality. And, we stand for that at On the Whistle. But from your perspective, and I know you're going to be our man at the women's AFCON, and we're going to follow all the latest news with you there. What have been some of your highlights from the season?
Yeah, I mean, it's been great seeing some of the African stars in Europe. Asisat being the best example. Even though she's had kind of an injury hit season, she still finished I think joint top goal scorer in La Liga, and so to see her and the likes of Tembi Khatana kind of bossing it in Spain and in other countries is really great to see. But I think for me the biggest thing has been seeing the CAF Women's Champions League this season. We did a pod on it earlier in, I think, November, and it was great to see finally women being given the platform on the continent that they so thoroughly deserve. And we saw that in terms of the quality. I think there was a lot of questions going into it in terms of, are we going to see huge disparities in quality because, we're doing regional qualifiers. And so are some of the leagues with really strong kind of women's leagues like Morocco, like Egypt, like Nigeria, are they just going to clean up? But kind of, it was really competitive. I mean, I looked to a team like, from Kenya, Vihiga Queens, not from Nairobi, not connected to any big major Kenya Premier League men's clubs. It's a very, very small club, not professional. And yet they held their own. They beat Asfar Rabat from Morocco. They pushed Sundowns. And that was what was really impressive and really surprising, is how competitive it was. I mean, Sundowns were the best team. They were the deserved winners, but they were pushed in a lot of games. And I think that was really exciting. And I think for me, the biggest positive from it was, you saw after the tournament, was the number of players who got big moves off the back of it. And I think that was the biggest thing, was that being on YouTube, being free to watch, suddenly these players were being given the platform to shine that they deserve and they've needed. You look at the likes of Evelyn Badu, who's player of the tournament, she's now in Sweden. I think from Vihiga Queens, 4 or 5 players have now moved abroad to Turkey, France, South Korea. And so it's just great to see that that's actually, finally there's a platform for the women's game to evolve. And hopefully with this AFCON, we missed the last one in 2020 because of COVID. Hopefully we'll be seeing the same thing, a jump up in quality, in competitiveness. Because again, in terms of on paper, we've got some huge teams. Finally, I think we've got some real challenges to Nigeria, mainly from South Africa. Cameroon are going to be good. I wouldn't look too far past Morocco either. The hosts, they've come a long way. They've looked good the last couple of years. But you've also got some debutants, the likes of Burundi, the likes of Botswana. And I think it's going to be really exciting again. And hopefully, again, this will be another platform for the African football to thrive, and for these players to get big moves, for these players to show the world what they've got.
Lots to look forward to this summer. The AFCON Women's Tournament is bound to be very competitive. And we will have teams in the race. In fence, like Courtney and I we'll have a Banyana team to support, to get behind. But staying on the theme of the AFCON, I know, Courtney, at the moment, your team, when I say your team, I mean Liverpool, your club team, are currently in negotiations with Sadio Mane. It looks like he's probably on his way out. I think as we start to look ahead and look at some of the key transfers, he's going to be one that is going to be one of the hottest properties this summer, waiting to see where he lands.
Zayn, the Sadio Mane transfer is going to cause a lot of people a lot of sadness, but I also think a lot of people a lot of joy. And I'll explain the both sides. Sadio Mane came to us, not the finished product. We bought him for 32 million at the period, which was a lot of money for someone who was nowhere near what he is today. He's given us 6 years of unbelievable joy, won huge amounts of trophies with him. And in those 6 seasons, he's become a world beater. And this is what Klopp does. Klopp finishes off players into what they currently are. Sadio Mane now is at a position where, if he is desiring a new project, as a Liverpool supporter, I can't begrudge him, because he came to us during a period when nobody was coming to us. And one of the things that he did was turn down Man United, who had made a bid for him, and come to us. So he'll always be loved by Liverpool people. But him leaving is going to make a lot of people sad, because he is such a good player. Why it'll make people happy that he's going is because for 6 seasons, 33 million, and if we get a price of value for him now, he should go for maybe close to 50 million. So why would you not sell him? He's given us absolutely everything, and we're selling him at a profit. I think it's only right that clubs are not greedy. We let him go. And then we open the door for other players, for Klopp to do what he does. So there's the two perspectives. Showing appreciation to the guy, being sad he's going, but also being happy because we are when does a sale of a top star go for more than what you bought him? That's a very rare commodity in this market. And now, I just want to also put this down there. We paid 33 million for Sadio Mane. He has scored over 100 goals and got close to over 100 assists.
Alasdair, I have to ask you, with Mane moving, where do you think he'll end up? Which club in Europe or around the world would benefit from him most?
Well, I think it's an interesting question, and because I think part of it is there's an element of him wanting pastures new, in terms of, this season has been hugely significant for him, mainly in terms of with Senegal, being the man who took them to the AFCON, and that they've been craving for so long. But also with Liverpool, such a letdown in terms of being so close to achieving so much. But one thing that I saw recently was really interesting, was in terms of the amount of money that he gets paid in comparison to Liverpool's other stars like Mohamed Salah. I think Mane makes less than half of what Salah makes. And so I think there's an element there where Mane is feeling, actually, I want to turn to being either the big star, or at least getting that paycheck that, I've so thoroughly deserved. Because in terms of, like Courtney was mentioning, the output he's had, if you compare it to players at Liverpool, at other clubs, he's not been getting the same kind of financial reward, as well as having necessarily being the star player. I mean, one thing that I think took a lot of Liverpool fans, but no Senegalese fans, by surprise, was how well Mane did when he's played through the middle. But of course, for Senegal, he's been playing through the middle his entire career. That's where he's most natural, is as a number 10 or as a false 9. In terms of clubs that I think could benefit from him, I think a lot. But I think the question is, in terms of what clubs have the money in the current market. I think, the big favorites are Bayern Munich, but I think that is kind of reliant on if Lewandowski goes. And, we saw earlier today that Bayern don't seem keen to let Lewandowski go. And so, until they offload him, will they have the funds for Mane? That'll be interesting to see. And, otherwise, it's hard to see him making a move to one of the big La Liga clubs. Barca, Real, I don't think either of them are in a position to take on. And, in many ways that leaves either a move to Italy, which, and Juve's already, spent, looks like they're bringing in some high profile players like Pogba. And so then maybe it leaves, just PSG. So I think it's going to be really fascinating, because I don't think we're in a market like we were, say, 5 years ago, where you have, 10 clubs that will spend hundreds and hundreds of millions and are ready to spend that on individual players, especially. I think we're now in a situation where there's very, very few clubs who can actually spend that kind of money that Liverpool might want. So I think a lot also depends on Liverpool and how much money they'll be asking for.
Absolutely. I, for one, would love to see him at Barcelona if we could make that happen. But like you, I think if he does go, it's got to be to the German giants and Bayern Munich, because they've probably got the money to make that happen once they offload Lewandowski. We've looked at Mane as in terms of the African abroad, and potentially being the biggest transfer this summer, or the most high profile. From an African domestic point of view, Courtney, I know that there is a player who's on your radar. His name is Ronwen Williams. He appeared on our podcast a few weeks ago and made it very clear that he was happy to be the Bafana number 1, very proud of that, to captain them, and also to continue in his role at SuperSport, one of the traditional forces in local South African football, in the sense that they're one of the mainstays, well-funded. We also spoke to Stanley Matthews, who runs that team. And, for all intents and purposes, it seemed like Ronwen was very happy at SuperSport. Although, I must say, Alasdair and I did listen to the pod, and he did leave the door slightly open when he said if the right offer came, he'd listen. Is that a transfer you'll be following closely?
Zayn, this transfer is growing legs. It had no legs earlier on. Ronwen stated very clearly how happy he was at SuperSport, how they align with his principles. He loves the way they don't only treat him, how they treat the other players in the club. And he just felt, this is a very good place. And he also did mention on our podcast that if he has to end his career at SuperSport, he has no problems with that. He has no problems with that. Firstly, what a gentleman to speak to. And I think he really embodied everything that, after also speaking to Stanley Matthews, came through Ronwen as well. But as you said, he left the door open. And as we know, Sundowns has got more money than water. They have a goalkeeper who's won close to 9 major trophies in South Africa, the most decorated goalkeeper ever in South Africa. His problem is he's 37 years old.
And the person you're talking about is Denis Onyango, the Ugandan.
And the person I'm talking about is Sundowns number 1, Denis Onyango. The difficulty for Ronwen is he's not dropping in standard. He's still a very good goalkeeper. But you can just hear the accountant in the background talking, listen, yeah, we get him off the payroll. Ronwen comes in cheaper. And Ronwen's not just a fly-by-night goalkeeper. Ronwen is a number 1, So I think Ronwen's going to go to Sundowns. What makes me also almost confirm this is that Ronwen's become very silent in his conversations with me. We normally have a bit of back and forth, but for the last 2 weeks, he's just gone off radar, saying nothing. I think the Ronwen move to Sundowns is going to work. And I would be pushing for that move if I'm Ronwen's agent.
I have to ask you, Denis Onyango is not in bad form. He's experienced. Yes, he's 37, so he's old in the tooth. I mean, Sundowns want to build a dynasty. Sundowns want to be competitive in Africa. Why wouldn't they just keep Denis for another season or 2 and bring Ronwen on at a later stage?
Zayn, I think it's the succession planning. This is it. The Sundowns also have, if you look at their purchases, they want to pick up players that is not going to develop into the success, but continue the success from the immediate time they hit the club. The club culture almost molds the player into, you coming here to win. And Ronwen did speak about this. He touched on that. He did say he will get to a point in his career where he wants to start winning. The thing that Sundowns can offer Ronwen, besides a bit more money, is the opportunity not to only win in South Africa, to win in Africa. And this is what the Bafana number 1 should be chasing. He should be chasing multiple trophies on the continent. Ronwen is at the right age to be that goalkeeper. His agent should be pushing for it. Ronwen himself should be pushing for it. The problem here at the moment is who's in front of him at Sundowns is not playing bad.
I wonder if there's like a sense in terms of, moving beyond, because obviously for Sundowns, they've cleaned up domestically, especially this season, the treble. There was never for any one moment that things looked in doubt. And, we've seen that Pirates and Chiefs have both, changing a lot in terms of backroom staff. They've, offloaded loads of players or bringing in new players. But I feel for me, there's almost a sense that, I think Onyango has kept those high standards and he's good enough to win the PSL for Sundowns. But is he good enough to win the Champions League? I think that's the question for me in terms of his aging and his slowing down. Because I remember in the Petro Luanda games when Sundowns got knocked out, I think 2 of the 3 goals that Sundowns conceded were kind of mistakes from Onyango. And again, as a fellow East African, I think he's fantastic. And I think he's a brilliant servant, both to Sundowns and previously to Uganda. But, I think for me, that's where this has so many legs in terms of Ronwen is you're taking him away from Pirates, away from Chiefs, who especially, let's be real, neither of them are in continental football next season. And so they both have, maybe a genuine shot at challenging for, whether it's the Nedbank or MTN or the PSL. But, can Sundowns do it in the Champions League? Because that's ultimately the big stumbling block for them, the last few years since Spitzer left. And so, maybe signing someone like Ronwen, who, has the potential to be one of the best goalkeepers in Africa. I think of the likes of, Taganuti and El Shenawy, who were both in the final last week. That's the standards in which I think Ronwen can be at. And that's the standards that Sundowns need their keeper to be at if they're going to go away to Morocco or Egypt and actually come away with a title.
Gentlemen, thank you for that discussion. Great to get your take on the transfers and recap the season. As promised, we're going to go to the mailbag. For those out there who want to send us a letter, we don't do snail mail, but we do social media. So hit us up at OTW_podcast on Twitter and Instagram. You can find us on Facebook in the On the Whistle podcast by searching On the Whistle podcast, rather, and by doing the same thing on YouTube. And that is where we get the majority of our comments today. And for those who listen to our podcast, you'll know about 2 years ago, we spoke to Bruce Grobbelaar, the former Zimbabwe goalkeeper, the man who won 6 league titles with Liverpool. No, we're not Liverpool's unofficial supporters club. That's just a theme that's come through today. I can promise you that. If Francis was here, he would assure you that we're not Liverpool supporters club. But this video that we posted about 2 years ago was Bruce Grobbelaar telling us the anecdote about how he ended the Liverpool curse by peeing on the Anfield goalposts. Go and listen to it. It's a great video. Whether you believe in Sangomas or whether you believe in Muti or not, go and take a listen. It's an interesting anecdote. And we had some comments from people who watched that video back that I'm going to read out to you now. The first being from Adedeo Aderian. He said, so what happened last season? That Virgin van Dijk didn't play? They lost 7 in a row at home. Or does it come with a clause that fans must be present? We had Soren Back say, good job, it wasn't poo that broke the curse. Sorry. Scatological humor does make me laugh. And we had Andrew Bill Marley, and he said, Mumbo Jumbo Brucey. Certainly a doubter. And finally, we had Des O'Neill, and he said, I remember a video of Bruce hanging from the bar because he was bored during a game. I think it was in Johannesburg at the time. A true sportsman, in my opinion. Talent, commitment, and entertainment. And I think we can all agree, Bruce Grobbelaar, incredibly successful, incredibly talented, had a real knack for doing things with the flair and flamboyance, certainly didn't live a boring life. But we can all agree, very, very entertaining. Gentlemen, I think that's a good place where we'll leave the pod today. Courtney, Alasdair, thank you for spending your time with me. Thank you for going through the transfers and, of course, your highlights for the season. Can't wait to do this again soon. We'll see you around the braai in a week or so.